English translation 825th contact Wednesday, 2nd November 2022, 2:35 a.m.
You are early again today. But welcome and greetings anyway, Ptaah, dear friend.
Edward, greetings too, and thank you for your welcome. It comes about because I have something to perform with Florena, and since I have time, I will visit you.
Can I find out right then what the panel had to say about what has come up with regard to the postponement of the elections that are due?
That was unfortunately an undertaking that was not of the right, but which apparently came about either as a result of a misunderstanding or carelessness or inattention and so on. The response of the panel was that it should be accepted for this time, but not appear another time. Everything is fixed on it, which is to be settled during your life and also never to be changed after your departure, but to continue to exist. This is because we want to continue to exercise control until the earthly reckoning of the year and to ascertain that no changes take place and that everything is observed as it was specified. It is not acceptable under any circumstances that changes take place, because from the teaching you bring, a religion and with it also falsifications of doctrine and of faith would arise, as has happened since time immemorial, but which is to be prevented this time. But this is only possible if everything is maintained and controlled correctly over all time, whereby the control also refers to the meetings of the individual groupings throughout the earth, which must therefore take place at certain times, as our apparatus is adjusted to these. If further groupings are formed, as we will experience through the control of our FIGU Centre, as everything in this respect is to be reported to and registered by the Mother Centre, then these will also be classified by us in the same system. Though it is urgent and inevitable that no other times for elections and meetings are ordered and carried out, because our control apparatuses are adjusted to the specific time of the meeting activity, consequently this has to be observed.
Thank you, so that is clear and nothing more needs to be said about it. What do you think about the fact that here on Earth governments are running up huge debts, that they are spending more money than they have at their disposal? For my part, I learned at home from my parents that debts should never be incurred, that the money available should be divided and managed sensibly, that it should always be enough for what is needed. Honesty should also be maintained in such a way that dishonesty can never be heard. However, when I observe the governments of this world, I recognize a tremendous dishonesty and, in addition, an unparalleled disgracefulness with regard to governmental debt-making. Practically every state is swimming in amounts of millions or billions of debts that weigh not only on the countries but especially on the peoples, who are saddled with high taxes that they have to pay to recoup the debts, if that would ever be possible, which will never be the case.
With Earth's financial dealings, to be accurate in this regard, I have studied it in depth and found that the bulk of Earth humans do not handle finances in a correct manner. This is especially true when they can freely dispose of foreign finances. I have noticed that especially in the circles of state leadership, it is very rare to find a person who is able to responsibly manage finances in such a way that instead of incurring debts, action is taken in such a way that balances and a reduction of debts are created. Acting in the opposite way is completely irresponsible, which in my opinion is absolutely obvious and really shows that such financially mismanaging state officials, that is to say incompetent state leaders, are incapable and unworthy of their office. In a responsible manner, such incompetent state leaders should never be appointed to office. Basically, such state leaders burden the state, and thus the people, financially, in such a way that it causes a burden as well as a lack of freedom down to the individual human being and forces the entire population under the state's financial thumb to such an extent that many human beings are able to master their general existence more badly than well.
That is undoubtedly the case, although it should also be noted that the majority of humanity has never learned and is not learning how to deal with money, that is to say, as you say, with finances correctly as well as responsibly. It happens, for example, that millions are won in the lottery or otherwise by earthlings who do not know how to handle money. Within a short period of time, they then squander the fortune they have won and are poorer than before, when they still had to live from hand to mouth. I remember that this also happened in rich Switzerland when a lottery millionaire went begging within 2 years because he had never learned to handle money correctly. I also remember what the debt collector told me when I had to take an order from him when I was back from India again and working as a commercial agent. He told me that he had to deal with about 67% of the citizenship regarding debt collection, where he also had to make a lot of distraints because people could not pay their debts. Many people, however, he said, would act in the opposite way than to manage their money correctly, go on big holiday trips abroad, buy a lot of this and that which they then could not pay for. So the sellers and shops and so on would have no choice but to file for debt collection, many of which would end up in seizures. The governments, however, make no effort in this respect, just as they do nothing to instruct the people in the correct handling of money, for example, by training and instructing the young adolescents, and thus in school, in the correct handling of money. Nothing of value is taught and done in this regard, which inevitably leads to a great deal of crime, such as theft, burglary, and the like, because the governments do not do anything, for example, to teach the problem of money in schools, which would enable the human beings to learn how to deal with money in their youth and would also teach and encourage them to work honestly. This would be a very important subject to teach, that is to say, to teach together with the teaching of the correct way of life, the way of living and independent thinking, the correct decisions and actions, instead of the senseless and consciousness-destroying religious beliefs. And this would both strengthen responsibility and minimize the workshiness of certain fellowmen and produce fewer thieves, cheats, and burglars.
That would probably be the case. But it is more than doubtful that you would be able to get through to the leaders of the state and also to the people, because the majority who would have to agree to this are stupid and therefore not thinking. Consequently, only a few persons who are disposed towards logic and reason, as well as responsibility, and who think for themselves, would approve of your effectively good advice. But as I know from my occupations with regard to the mentality and so on of us human beings, your advice will fall on infertile ground, because the stupidity of the majority of the world's population is so catastrophically wrong and out of touch with reality through religious and worldly faith, that not even a trace of understanding is able to consciously penetrate into consciousness. Moreover, the folks are so devout that they consider what the media spread to be the real truth, even though it is often based on lies and deceit. As we see again and again, the people are being lied to in many media, and the readership is being deceived in such a way that the majority of earthly humanity is in no way informed about what is really happening. The might of the leaders of the state and the economy, as well as the dark middlemen and the very powerful religions which have a powerful, believing influence on the state governments of every kind, are more or less elevated above every people of a state in such a way that they are held down and completely powerless as a result of the lies and deceptions presented. In various states, and not only in Russia, China and North Korea, reports in the media are censored, distorted, and sometimes even banned, just as the same thing happens with all the television stations controlled by the state. The peoples are even fraudulently informed with political false reports, as they are also presented with fake news, as the peoples are also deceived with broadcast films, which often originate from other locations and are supposed to mendaciously testify as current news supplements of alleged events that are currently acute. The flow of information from the media to the folks is often so distorted that sometimes no information at all, or only very inadequate information, corresponds to the truth. Due to the horrendously developed technology, it has even become possible that the faces, bodies and movements of state leaders or otherwise important persons are fraudulently manipulated in a film-moving manner and changed in such a falsifying way that everything corresponds to reality and thus looks real. For example, interviews are broadcast on television that never took place with state leaders or other persons. In this way, the people of the earth are lied to and deceived by certain media with regard to politics and other matters, as well as being misinformed about important issues. Films and also photos are manipulated and falsified in such a way that they appear to be real and original, so that the readers judge them to be real and true. In this way, interviews are also fraudulently produced that never took place, but are presented as genuine and broadcast on television or published in the written media. So much of the diverse flow of information that reaches the public is false and manipulated, in which the state leaders themselves are often involved and also act against the freedom or the lives of individual human beings or the entire national population in a way that is contemptuous of human beings and criminal among themselves. This, as for example England acts in the case of Julian Assange, whom it wants to extradite to America, where he is threatened with a life sentence or even the death penalty for revealing the truth about military crimes, which on the one hand can be carried out officially, and also insidiously, by Assange being murdered in prison by rewarded killers, which is then officially hypocritically regretted by America.
To this end, after all, the psychiatrist Freud did everything he could to ensure that such crimes could take place, for he enlightened human beings, as well as the people of governments and secret services, and so on, and taught them that the nastiest, characteristically evil and also vile meannesses, lurking in the deepest character for an outburst, are awakened in human beings. The fact that Freud, with his thoughtless remarks about the subconscious, has thereby also drawn the attention of human beings to the fact that all evil is registered in their charter depths and is constantly lurking to break out, no one wants to hear. But it is a fact that through this things have increased, such as deceit, murder and manslaughter, as well as meanness of false accusation, lying, deceit, hatred and revenge, as well as the state of evil presumption, and so on, as well as falsehoods and abuse of criminal law have been brought about, as is now to be practiced, for example, in the United States of America, which is to affect Assange, who was unjustly arrested in England and is now imprisoned. This is because he is accused of having endangered American state security, even though he is not a U.S. citizen. So Assange is being accused of being a non-American and threatened with severe punishment for exposing American atrocities and warmongering, which is to be punished by death or life imprisonment. That really takes the biscuit. Moreover, Julian Assange is not even an American citizen, but is nevertheless being held captive by England and extradited to the US with its complicity, which is expected to happen in the next few weeks. This is despite the fact that Assange is not covered by US criminal law, just as England is not part of America and therefore has no right whatsoever to detain Assange and extradite him to the US. Assange has not committed any criminal offense in America. It was different with Edward Snowden, who was able to flee to Russia as an American who exposed US war crimes.
That is indeed the case, but discussing it is probably pointless. On the contrary, there is now something else. Consequently, I have the following to say, and that is something that I am instructed by the board to say, that it will be as a result of the ongoing global warming that winter time will slowly fade away in its coldness. Consequently, in this respect, a change will occur that members of the passive group will increasingly feel cold or want to use the time to work at the center after summertime and after autumn. It has been decided that if there is a lack of work, the passive members will also have the opportunity to further their education in the teaching of truth, teaching of creationity, teaching of life at the center. In order to consider and decide this, the members of the core group shall be given a period of reflection until the middle of next year.
That is certainly good and right, but how should the further training then take place? We do not have enough people here at the center who could take on and carry out such a task, by which I mean that we do not have any members here who could give authoritative lessons. On the one hand, there is a lack of the necessary knowledge, and on the other hand, everyone here at the center is working all year round and cannot teach passive members on the side.
That is of course the case. There is nothing that can be done about it. But it is not meant in this way, but in such a way that the passive members deal with the teaching themselves, as it is also done elsewhere, that the learning is done independently and alone. The center is not meant to be a place in the form of a study center where personal teaching takes place, but the teaching letters are meant to be learned as learning material in a permanently private way, independent of a course with personal guidance and instruction in the center. The whole of learning should never lead to the creation of a center of commerce through a teaching center, which would inevitably lead to the FIGU Centre being turned into a training center, that is to say a learning center, where personal instruction for learners would take place. Furthermore, this would violate the statutes, which prohibit FIGU from any entrepreneurial activity, so a training center of the kind that would teach in a commercial way is already impossible from this point of view.
But I was not thinking in that way either, but that teaching should simply be done without remuneration.
I see, I misunderstood you there. Of course, that cannot be considered either, because the center and thus the core group can only deliver the teaching in written form and learn the teaching in more detail in their own circle, as is also the case with groupings worldwide who learn in the group circle, as they also do in private personally.
Of course, that's the way it has to be.
So that is cleared up as well.
Yes, unfortunately, sometimes not everything is clear at the first moment, which is why you talk to each other at greater length to clarify and understand everything correctly. But now something else. During our last conversation, I did not make a mistake when I was recording the conversation, when later in the playback the contact report said Andreas Graben instead of Marian Graben, but this probably has something to do with the fact that my work is constantly interfered with and wrong words appear, as well as different numbers, mainly 4, 9 and 8, but also letters are constantly interwoven, so that sometimes I myself can no longer decipher what I have actually called up and written down, so I have to start again. Witnesses to this are various core group members who sit or stand by and watch while I write. Also, when I transfer everything to a flash drive, suddenly something else is to be read, or words or whole paragraphs disappear. For example, my explanation when I explained that Sverhoff had made me see a strange life form in the depths of the sea in the south of the Pacific Ocean has also disappeared without a trace. He also let me see many other sea creatures in the deep sea, as I told you, but unfortunately all that was explained has disappeared in the stick, which I only noticed this night. Bernadette has just let the last contact report out into the world, and in it the malicious insertion of Andrew's trench instead of Mariana's trench has been put in, and furthermore the paragraph that disappeared has unfortunately also completely disappeared in the computer, which is why I am recalling what was said to put it in here again, if I can do that now.
That is possible without any difficulty. Go if you want to retrieve the paragraph part now.
Yes, I would like to do that.
Then there's nothing against you retrieving it.
Good, then I will. It is probably good if I start there at the beginning when I began to speak when you asked me. But it will take me a while to get the whole of the paragraph back. We will just have to take that time now. Good, I can start. Good, if you must. What should I start with? That Sverhoff and I were together in the depths of the seas as well as with Quetzal. I have said something about that before. It was probably from the dives with Sverhoff's pear-shaped spaceship at Vulcanos near Stromboli and generally in the Mediterranean, then at the Mariana Trench, and otherwise from the diving trips in the world's oceans. Sverhoff showed me special things of the world for my 10th birthday. With his spaceship he took me to places that I will certainly never see again. He could dive very deep into the oceans with his spaceship and also penetrate solid matter just as if everything had been butter. It was also like that with ice, which made it possible for him to let me see in Antarctica that there was also a very deep place in the earth about 11 or 12 kilometers deep, like the Mariana Trench. I also saw the deep part of the earth at the Dead Sea, where I had been several times on my journeys. In the seas he let me see creatures of which our earthly scientists claim that they died out millions of years ago, but which in reality still exist. So I also saw a huge creature that was very strange and absolutely indefinable to me until Sverhoff explained that it was a creature that was jellyfish-like but a separate species of this genus. I also saw two other large creatures of which Sverhoff said that there are still few specimens living in the depths of the seas today, although it is claimed that they died out millions of years ago. I also saw a creature that had tentacles about 100 to 120 meters long, and so on, also in the Himalayan mountains, and indeed openly. However, I do not want to say where, because otherwise a hunt would be organized immediately. Consequently, I will make my well-known dots. I could see four beings, of which it is said that they would not exist. There are also supposed to be some over on the American continent, but I did not see any of them. On the other hand, I was with Sverhoff in various caves reaching very deep into the earth, into which, as far as I know, no so-called civilized human being has yet penetrated, but which were partly explored by prehistoric human beings in very early times. And when I think about what is known about Eduard today, but the reality was quite different, I shudder. I also think of the fact that it is still claimed today that the human beings of the earth were born in Africa, after which they spread from there across the earth precisely because they emigrated and settled in the world. Anthropologists and so on are still trying to prove that in early times human beings spread out over the vastness of the earth with fins and ships, but this is only partially true, although they began to develop worldwide in the same genus but in different species around 12 million years ago, when there were still many fixed land connections between islands and large fixed areas. Since then, everything has changed enormously, and many of the islands and mainlands of that time have disappeared, while new ones have formed and are now inhabited by many earthlings, and large mainlands are called continents. Imaginatively, however, the majority of researchers who dig around in the Earth's soul and generally in everything old and so on invent nothing but fantasy stories of how it is supposed to have been, and without really having any idea of how it really was. The believing earthlings then take everything at face value and believe the bare fanciful suppositions, just as they also believe all religious nonsense, and then they claim everything as truth, although little or nothing of what they have been told or supposedly handed down from time immemorial as truth corresponds to the truth. But something else: you told me that this year in Europe alone, according to your count, there will be over 21,000 deaths from heat. But how bad might it get in this respect if global warming rises above 3 degrees, and even higher than 1.5 degrees, as the fantasists assume could be limited? As I know from the time when Sverhoff and I were looking into the future, it has turned out that global warming will rise even higher in the future, for which on the one hand the human beings will be to blame, but on the other hand it is also a natural event that the earthling cannot change, so it should not be mentioned. In addition, I remember that Sverhoff explained to me with regard to the earthling scientists that they are still looking for their alleged knowledge far beyond the moon and not where it actually is. He also spoke of the exploitation of the planet's resources, which has an enormous influence on the atmosphere and the climate, to the effect that all the mining of ores, gas and earth, petroleum, rare earths and so on has an effect on the atmosphere and the climate, but that geological science and so on only becomes aware of this when it is too late to be able to change anything. So the scientists in charge do not know anything about it, just as they do not have the necessary equipment and instruments to be able to make the actual observations. Besides, many of the scientists are narrow-minded know-it-alls anyway, that is to say narrow-minded and conceited, who insist on their ideas and react extremely angrily when something else is said that is contrary to their opinion. They also think that they have eaten wisdom with a shovel, so it is useless to try to explain anything to them. So, as Farhoff explained, the Earth and its resources help determine how the atmosphere and climate develop, because everything together interacts. So if one is damaged, all the damage is done to the other. So if a lot of the Earth's resources are depleted, not only is the planet itself damaged, but also its atmosphere and climate, which is now also being proven by the ongoing climate change that can no longer be stopped. However, no scientist is concerned about the inconsistencies for the Earth itself, that the exploitation of the Earth's resources has a very disruptive and changing effect on the atmosphere and consequently also on the climate in this respect. These resources are in fact a decisive factor in the whole functioning and general equilibrium of the Earth in terms of the existence of all its many natural forms of all that exists. The atmosphere and climate have been and continue to be adversely affected by the excessive exploitation of all the Earth's diverse resources, as also by pollution and environmental degradation, which have already destroyed and irrevocably wiped out innumerable life of the most diverse genera and species.
Unfortunately, earthly scientists are really not so educated in their field that they would really have such knowledge that they would grasp, know and also understand the actual connections. They form an opinion of what they cling to and believe in, but they can't prove what is correct and what is wrong about it.
Unfortunately, that is indeed the case. And it is necessary for me to say something about the opinion, because I have telephone calls again and again where I am asked what my opinion is in this respect and in that respect. It is necessary for me to say that I never have an opinion, because an opinion is based on something unprovable, whereas reality alone proves with its truth, which applies to it and which is its own, what can be called and represented as pure truth, and therefore never as an opinion. Effective reality is also effective truth, and this can only be called truth, but never valid as opinion, because it is precisely opinion that is based on the unproven, that is to say, that is not on the fact that it is demonstrably based on reality and its truth. Therefore, in my own matter and with regard to the telephonates, I only have to say that I have no opinion whatsoever, but always remain neutral in my search. My profession is simply that I only state existing facts and neither comment on them nor express opinions about them, and in any case I remain neutral, which is why I also only report everything truthfully, such as what I have experienced myself, what I have seen, what I have heard, or what I have said in conversations, and so on. When I publish newspaper articles or reports and so on, I do so without commenting on them, and I remain neutral. If something is said or explained in any matter, then it is an explanation of how the true state of affairs basically is. In this way, as I take a stand on a matter, my word also refers to the stupid and therefore thoughtless demonstrations of all those demonstrators who, in their ignorance and irresponsibility, not only cause immense damage through destruction of various kinds and their wrong behavior. It also refers to the fact that I have found out that the demonstrators have no knowledge whatsoever of the real and true reason for the pollution, destruction of the environment, and the destruction of everything worth living for. The truth is that all the demonstrators are openly or covertly directed by elements who are either fanatics, misguided, anti-state, or stupid, and therefore non-thinkers or lunatics, know-it-alls, anti-people, anti-government, or anti-order, and so on, who deceitfully induce human beings, mainly younger ones, to demonstrate. However, none of the effectively stupid demonstrators stupid precisely because they themselves do not think but are trapped in a belief as indoctrinated into them by their parents and other educators as a result of their belief in religions from their earliest childhood look for effective reality and its truth. Basically, they simply believe the inflammatory and deceitful elements and run along with demonstrations, stick themselves to the ground with superglue, cause fatal traffic accidents, smear valuable things, sculptures and pictures and so on with paint and rubbish. Pure destructiveness is brought to bear and without even a thought being able to be grasped in the process because faith prevents this. In all the demonstrators who are stupid and therefore incapable of thinking, who are usually not only religious believers but also secular believers, logic is impaired as well as reason and rationality. As a result of their stupidity, their perceptions of reality are so porous and clouded that they can neither recognize, grasp nor in any way understand the effective truth of environmental destruction and pollution. This is because their intelligentum is not sufficient for this, and furthermore, they truthfully do not include themselves and their doings. Consequently, without a thought regarding overpopulation, they put in mass offspring into the world and thus promote environmental pollution and environmental destruction all the more. The full truth lies in the reason for overpopulation because it causes all the environmental destruction, pollution and destruction of the climate and slowly also of the atmosphere. Also many other things can be traced back to overpopulation, which can only be stopped if it is reduced to a normal level, that is to say a normal norm that is suitable for the planet. The effective truth is that all environmental destruction, pollution and the slow destruction of the atmosphere, which will undoubtedly also take place over time, are caused by climate change and the rapidly progressing destruction of the whole planet Earth by the irresponsible and countless all-destroying, many thousand-fold machinations of overpopulation to the point of no return. Earth resources are also being exploited to such an extent that the Earth is groaning and already showing evil effects of various kinds. This is because the Earth's resources have already dwindled rapidly, and soon there will be nothing left that can be squeezed out of the Earth because there will simply be nothing left and everything will come to an end. The whole nature of the planet is being destroyed by the machinations of overpopulation, which is growing ever larger. It is mendaciously claimed scientifically that there are currently around 8 billion, whereas there are already more than 9.2 billion. This while the Earth at its peak was designed to support a total population of no more than 2 billion. But the human beings of the Earth have proliferated in terms of their billion-fold offspring and have multiplied to such an extent that they have become a threat to the continued existence of the whole planet as well as to the whole of nature and its fauna and flora. As a result, the extinction of many life forms has increased in number so that today more than 1,000 genera and species of plants, animals, creatures, snakes, amphibians, fish, birds, bees, butterflies, beetles, ants, termites, wasps, hornets, and all kinds of other thousand-fold life forms disappear from the entire surface of the Earth, from the waters and mountains, from the skies and from the soil, and are thus eradicated. In principle, demonstrations against environmental pollution and against environmental destruction as well as against climate change and global warming and so on are of no use because in reality and unstoppably the huge mass of humanity, that is to say overpopulation, continues to grow uncontrolled, whereby the pollution and destruction of the planet, of nature as well as its fauna and flora is rampant and can slowly but surely not only destroy but also exterminate all life. The huge mass of overpopulation, that is to say the human beings of the Earth, will not end their destructive machinations but will continue them endlessly until nothing can be saved. No demonstration will be of any use to stop the destruction of the environment, the pollution, the poisoning of the atmosphere, and the climate change, because the majority of the human beings of the Earth will never be taught anything about this. This is because, due to all the irresponsibility, the majority of Earth humans only think of themselves and moreover are religiously and worldly stupid and thus non-thinking. On the one hand, this results in absolute indifference, but also in the attitude that others are responsible for it, that others will fix it and do it, and that in time everything will be put in order. Not even an iota of thought is given to this, but belief and offspring continue to be conceived on a large scale, and masses of offspring are brought into the world which already cause much evil in terms of environmental pollution and so on through birth alone. This is to say nothing of what will happen to them when they grow up and become adults, because the offspring will act in the same way as their producers. Pollution and environmental destruction will be their profession, as thoughtlessly as is the case with the majority of the overpopulation. This majority is unteachable, just like the demonstrators themselves, who do not understand that if they demonstrate, it should be done peacefully, without violence and destruction on the one hand, and on the other hand, the demonstration should be consciously and clearly directed towards what actually needs to be remediated. But when demonstrating against environmental pollution and destruction, then it can only be in any correct way that overpopulation must be fought, because it alone, through its machinations, is to blame for all pollution and environmental destruction, for the destruction of the planet, of nature, as well as for the absolutely irrevocable extinction of many life forms. So it is inevitably necessary that overpopulation be very drastically reduced through a controlled worldwide and multi-year birth stop. That alone is what can and is helpful in stopping and ending all that is rampant environmental destruction, the extinction of thousands of life forms, as well as pollution and much of other evils. This, however, is not considered by the stupid brush protesters, because they do not want to accept their sexual posturing regarding procreation and see this as a purely private matter and think in their belief after me the deluge.
This is unfortunately the way of Earth humans, for their bulk is so caught up in its faith that no logic and neither its intellect nor reason can be addressed. Your words, however, say exactly what should be, for what you say is fundamentally correct, for environmental destruction and pollution, as well as all destructive, annihilating and exterminating evils, can only be minimized and reduced to a minimum, if overpopulation is decimated in such a way that its machinations are ended worldwide, so that the planet itself, nature and its fauna and flora can come down again. However, it will no longer be possible to regenerate it as it was before, because too much has already been destroyed by the machinations of humanity, that it cannot be irrevocably restored and causally restored to what it was before, even with the greatest effort. Under certain circumstances, the damaged and harassed atmosphere, in respect of which science is silent, can be largely and satisfactorily restored to normal, though there is no possibility of the climate, which has been very badly affected by man's fault, being calmed again in the foreseeable future, and of the evil to come being stopped.
Unfortunately, the very believing earthlings are like black entities in which everything is absorbed and disappears without effect, without even an iota of anything being explained. But speaking of black entities with Svahoth, I learned that these are super-heavy, super-rich energy matter formations which today are simply called black holes, although they are just the opposite, namely super-heavy giant formations with a mass of millions of captured stars and planets, asteroids and comets and so on. These black structures will usually form new galaxies in the distant future, as Svahoth explained. These gigantic formations, which are called black holes today. Svahoth let me see, it was probably 15,000 or 17,000 or so light years from Earth Omega Centauri, where such a thing is and in whose area countless star formations are rapidly orbiting it. He explained that a new galaxy would form from this in the distant future, as also happened with the Milky Way, which he also let me see with its black giant formation. This, he said at the time, would one day merge with the Andromeda Galaxy, because they would meet in about 3.2 billion years, if I remember correctly. That's also where that huge long thing that you made me see came from in 2017. This thing that was half asteroid, half comet and orbited the sun but then disappeared again into the depths of space. You said that elongated things like that were very rare.
That is so. But
Once again, at this time of day, the telephone sometimes rings. One moment, please. Yes, Maya, good day. It is soon morning. Why are you calling me at this hour? Yes, I understand, and I assure you of my deep participation. But for us it is just in the early morning hours. Well, okay, I did not actually write that in my book. But that is not so important. Good, then I will tell them that the affirmation from the nihilo was a gas when no, it was an impulse which is inexplicable to me, and I also do not know how and from where it arose. What kind of impulse it was I really do not know, but from it the beginning of all existence developed. A gas I do not know, I was not there. But from this the absolutum of being developed, that is to say created, from which the 6 other absolutum forms emerged. You are welcome. But now I would be grateful if yes, okay, all right, goodbye. Yes, goodbye. That's just the way it goes with me sometimes. The call came from Japan, a German who has lived there for about 40 years. He got my telephone number from who also emigrated there a long time ago and with whom I corresponded for a long time, but now he has died at the age of 83, as I just found out.
there is no stopping that.
When the time comes, there is no avoiding it. It just cannot be helped. You are right with your silence, because there is really nothing to say about it.
That is so, but now I want to discuss the following with you, which shall remain between us.